So, hi everyone. Welcome to the Fire My Belly podcast. I have an amazing guest today who is one of the most strong and resilient people on this planet that I know of. She happens to be my aunt, so I have the great pleasure of getting to call her family and didn't have to work so hard to find you on this plane.
Mhm.
But I'm just super honored to have you here, and we have a lot of really good juiciness to get into today around your journey and your life story and all the wisdom and insight that's come with it. So thank you so much for being here. I'm
I'm
so
super
excited.
excited. Me too, and so honored, right? Like we
Yes.
were we're just so connected in so many ways, and this is
Yeah.
like just like a natural evolution for you, and then an honor to invite me into your space in this way.
Yeah. Yes, you're always somebody who throughout my entire life, have had just such a deep connection with. I mean, not only the way in which we think, but I also think the
Mhm.
language in how we express that is very similar. So it's always been able to chit chat with you and shoot the shit, no matter what the topic is, really. But of course, we love to explore the esoteric type stuff with each other the most, I think, because
Yep.
we don't get to do it too often. So I'm excited to just, yeah, show people this conversation and get like a taste of our relationship, because it is a really special one. So yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being
Yeah.
here.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me. So where do you want to start?
I'm thinking that I would really love to just give everybody who's listening a little overview of your life. Obviously not like, birth to now, but kind of like just an overview. Walk us through your timeline of your healing journey and sort of where that started and where that stemmed from, and sort of the experience, the up and downs of that, and the experience uh, um, of your healing that was certainly not linear, and
At
certainly
all.
for any
At
of
all.
us.
Yeah, I think we'd be here an awfully long time. It might be like a 10-part series if we go through my whole timeline and all
Which
the
would be
work that
fun.
I've done. And we're like, if people want it, we could do another one. They
Very
might.
true. Very true.
Um, I'd be down for that. But I think that because it's going to be sort of more of a high level overview with some deep dives where you want. So based on what we've talked about. So I think like first of all, my name's Renee.
Yes.
Um, let me start there. And my pronouns are she and her. And I think that's really important to say in this day and age because you would never know unless I tell you. And I want all people to feel included in this space, no matter who they are, how they identify. And I am wishing that I spoke 7 languages so I can include everyone from all over the place. So hopefully, if
Yes.
we can get it translated. That would be amazing. But I have had quite the journey on this planet. And when I knew. So that's like wisdom doesn't just happen, and learning is really hard and painful. And I am definitely someone who can sit before you and kind of make it sound easy. But I want to
Mhm.
be very clear that none of this felt easy in the times that I was going through it. And so, if I want to say to anyone that's listening that if you're going through something and it feels really hard and you've been bunking your head against the wall multiple times, literally or figuratively, um, it's okay to feel frustrated and angry and uncomfortable and impatient and all of those things because I think that's naturally part of it. And we can talk a little bit more about that, but I think like for me the biggest thing with that is like given time and a little bit of personal grace from self or others,
Mhm,
I
mhm.
think that we can find our way through that and manage the pain that we've been through and find some journey like healing in our journey um by holding on to moments of love.
Mhm.
I wear my love is the cure sweatshirt because I
Mhm.
think that's the message. um if you hear nothing else but want, just know to find love in your surroundings wherever you can that feels healthy for you.
Yes.
um so I don't know, like I have a long journey, so I'm like, where do I start? So I don't know, like why don't you tell me where you like where what for you stands out
I
that
think
you want to like be?
I think you're like I think similar to me, a lot of the pain started to surface probably teenagehood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like maybe even
Yeah.
early teenagehood, like 14.
Yeah. Pretty
Yeah.
early.
And so,
Yeah.
and my addiction started when I was like 15 and a half. So I feel like, and we all hear it all the time, is like being a teenager is not easy. You're going through a lot of changes. There's a lot of hormones. There's a lot of
Hmm.
new experiences. You're experimenting with your independence and your personality and who you are. You're also
Yeah.
coming into awareness of your childhood a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
I feel like that really happens more when you're like 19, 20, and you're like, what
Yeah.
the heck was going on?
Yeah.
But I feel like just take me through when you first started noticing this like depth in yourself and this pain. Um, and as much as you want, what it stemmed from, but then how that kind of led into an addiction. So like that
Okay.
like why that became your source of comfort or your way of managing your pain.
Yeah. I think that the way that I see it now, right, when I look back and I go, okay, what are the threads, right? How did the tapestry become this tapestry?
Yeah.
Um, I think about like when I was really, really young, and I was very much surrounded by a lot of people who talked a lot about spiritual things. And
Hmm.
I always felt very connected to that, but I felt very confused by the harshness. So I think the
Yeah.
juxtaposition of like understanding spirit to the best of my ability when I was a young girl, which, other folks around me at that age might have been like, oh, it's so cute. But like, honestly, like when I look back, that 7-year-old version of me was like very deep
Hmm.
um, for that age. Right.
Yep.
And then, so a little bit of like, oh, good girl. Right. But then it's like, ew. Right. Like,
You're like, it's
um,
not that.
I'm like, I'm actually experiencing like a whole lot of stuff and I need you to
Yeah.
hear me, right? And they're
Yeah.
not hearing me. And I'm like, what did I bring on this to this planet with me? I don't know.
Yes.
Um, so I would say that thread feels really important in this.
Mhm.
Also just a caveat.
Mhm.
I was adopted into the family that I grew up in, and come from lines that also like have substance use disorder in that line that I found out later about. I was able to confirm, and I was born to a very young mother who then gave me up for adoption in the early 70s. So I think that that's really important too. So there's this line of pain that comes directly from that I discovered some things later in my 20s, early 30s.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and I would say that like when I felt and I will say there's also mental health, right? So I'll say there's also mental health and so issues. And so I think I was probably 11 or 12
Yeah.
when I think what hit first was the insomnia. Um, my brain is just like always on.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not going to talk about anything that's like diagnosed or undiagnosed 'cause I don't think it matters. I think the experience and how I perceived it matters. But like
100%. Yeah.
I really experienced like heavy dialogue in my brain. And I had a lot of critical people. And when I say critical, I don't mean important. I mean critical, like people criticizing in like negative, like unhelpful ways for things that aren't important. And so I had this like these running dialogues that would keep me up and around people and places and things and if I was okay and all this. So I remember that starting pretty young, and it
Yeah.
developed pretty quickly into like really low mood, really high mood, depending on what was going on around me. And this impulsiveness that
Mhm.
I think that I didn't understand. I just knew it felt like I was being called to do
Yeah.
things that I didn't understand, right?
Yes.
Um, like when my mom and I talk about it, like we talk about all of this now and have for years. And I would say, she's like, what was going on? I'm like,
Mhm.
your guess is as good as mine,
Mhm.
but it felt like I was being pulled to do certain things.
Yeah.
And that's where the only language we have for it is impulsivity. I
Yeah.
don't even know if that's the right word, but
Yes. Yeah. That's the hard thing
that
because I very much relate to that. Impulsivity started to happen. Sorry, my
that's
charger.
okay.
started to happen for me at the same age. It was the same thing.
Yeah.
It was like this innate, like, this is the truth of my being right now. The way that
Yep.
I feel and the way that I'm seeing
Yep.
this is the absolute truth of my being. And it doesn't feel, anything else would not be authentic to me in this moment. Right. And then
Mm-hmm.
we're working from a place that's maybe askew, and we don't really recognize it because we're so
Yeah.
young. We don't have the capacity to have that third
No.
person overview quite yet. Maybe in other ways we do, but
Yeah.
that impulsivity is like almost a way to try and it was I feel like, and tell me if this was different for you. I feel like that impulsivity was a way to deal with the emotions, to
Yeah.
externalize them,
Yeah.
and to not
Yeah.
make it feel like you were so full of shit all the time.
Yeah. No, I would agree 100%. I think like there was so much going on, including like abuses, right, of all the natures.
Yeah.
And you guys can fill in the blanks. There's multiple of kinds, and all of those are most of our stories, especially as women or people identifying as women and or female. And so I think that I had a lot of that was going on in my life as a young girl. And so I didn't have anywhere to put it. And so I think that um it came very naturally to be very impulsive.
Yes.
I was very creative. I was very thoughtful. I've always been very loving, and very kind. I didn't have great boundaries because of what I had gone through. So I think impulsivity and just like finding love where I could and finding belonging where I could. I mean,
Mhm.
you and I were talking a little bit right before starting recording about like you belong where you say you belong, not where people tell you you belong. And I think that was a lot of my journey has been finding where I want to belong, not where
Mhm.
other people want me to be.
Mhm.
And um, because I always had this reaction to like, you have to be like this to belong here. And I think that's bullshit. And
Yeah.
um, and I can only isolate myself. You can isolate me, but then I have a choice, right? Like if you're like,
Yeah.
I don't want you here, then I have a choice in that. So I
Yep.
think like by the time I was 13, I was just like I was a mess. By the time I was 14, I was regularly running away from home. Um, like I think I got through freshman year of high school, and I was a straight A student. I was a really good. I was a really good kid. Like I was really well behaved until I wasn't.
Mhm.
But even in that like not well behaved, the only part that was like really not well behaved was the absconding from home and the anger that would somehow ensue when I got home as I was building up to the next cycle of running away.
Yeah.
My mom tells me that like she would always see it on my face when it was about to happen. She would always know she might wake up the next morning and I would be gone.
Mhm.
And usually $20 would be missing from someone's pocket. Um, and it's really funny because I didn't find substances at that point. I mean, I did a little bit. I had some like uh I would say engagement with drug use and alcohol use when I was pretty young, but nothing that like no binge using, no like nothing like that. Like I was turned
Yeah.
on to some narcotics, I was turned on to some alcohol, and it just wasn't anything I liked. I think the thing that I picked up the most was coffee and cigarettes at that point. It was like my favorite.
Yep.
But like there's this thing that like people think that when you're engaged in that kind of behavior and you're on the streets and you're running with these folks that back then in the 80s, it was just a bunch of young punk kids on the
Mhm.
street
Mhm.
that you somehow are all using a bunch of drugs. Now, were there people doing all of that? Absolutely. There were older kids around, there were people doing all kinds of stuff, but I wasn't engaging in that in the same way. Um, I would say hypersexuality was probably more so, and I didn't even engage in like sexual acts until I was older. Um, but I would, definitely there was other pieces of intimacy, physical intimacy that you can be engaged in without
Sure.
going further. So I think like this whole like my teenage years from like 14 to 17, and we'll get into that, was really about like finding my place. And it wasn't until I was 16 when like the drugs hit.
Mhm.
And that was my first bout of like a really intense cycle of what disordered using. And shortly thereafter, I became pregnant, um, and had stopped using, but I don't know what went on. I think my cycles were always really weird. And they really impacted my mood heavily. They were very painful from an early on age, lots of migraines. So I want to like include like the cycles of female
Yeah.
beings, like
Yeah. It's
our
major.
uteruses and our hormones, like do things to us that isn't talked about and well enough, maybe more so now than ever. And it blows my mind how much I don't know. And I'm learning so much from all of you and all the people that are standing up for our rights right now and like
Yeah.
learning and like talking about pain management for us because it was awful.
Mhm.
And so I got pregnant. I lost that first baby. I was about 4 months along when that baby miscarried. It was a little boy. And
Mm.
then I got pregnant again not too long after, which I was misinformed. I thought I couldn't get pregnant after a miscarriage. By the way, you can.
That's so wild. Oh my gosh. That's
By the way,
wild.
you can, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like very real, right? And
Yeah.
so and then I went on to have my first child, who is alive and well and fierce and fabulous.
Another
And
amazing human being on this planet. Oh
oh,
my gosh.
oh, absolutely. She is
Go
something
on and on
wild
about
to
her
me.
too.
I know, right? We got to have her on this podcast, but
Yeah.
she is she is something else. So I was 17 when I had her.
Mm.
Um, so not only were the chips stacked against me,
Yeah.
in the world, like I would go sign her up for school and people would be like, "Where's her mom?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, this young punk girl with this little beautiful child. And I'd be like, "I am her mom." And they're like, "No way. We need her real mom here to sign her." And I'd be like,
Dude.
this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous, right? Or like the looks and the words people would use. Like people are very brave and brazen and
When they
like
have a belief about something or an opinion, yeah, the filter is gone. It's
it's
very interesting.
gone. It's gone.
Yeah.
Like and the damage that's done by that, right? I don't think people realize, and I think that's a good thing to throw out in this podcast is like be thoughtful with your words
Yes.
because you don't know one of your people is going to experience something similar and you're going to feel like a jerk later. I've been there.
Yep.
um or like you don't know what someone's going through, how are you going to impact them? Like those words stick, man. And if that's your goal, then good job, you did a great job.
Yeah.
You hurt me, cool.
Which is even more like, what is the point in shaming somebody for the life that they've chosen to live?
Yeah,
They also might not be stoked on what has happened, but they have to survive what has happened and they
yeah,
have to deal with it and they have to choose to be more than their
yeah,
circumstances. But when you're already in a place where so much is going on internally and then the external world is invalidating you in some way or stigmatizing you in some way, I
yeah,
think it pushes you even further into yourself. You're like, well, then
yeah,
and it brings it back to that thing of like, well, then I don't belong. And so
yeah,
much of this conditioning from the outside world that's telling us we don't belong, it like suppresses our authenticity because now instead of trying to just be ourselves and figure out who that is, we're trying to figure out how to navigate the world in a way that doesn't hurt us. And it's like that
yeah,
you're constantly hyper vigilant in every
yeah,
situation. Um, and
yeah,
then it just creates more disconnection from who
yeah,
you really are and the parts of you that are strong and that can be resilient and that can help you through the other things that you may be going
yep.
through. It's a really disorienting experience for sure.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
well said. Well
Yeah.
said. I think it's really interesting. So like I had her, so I think that's an important piece of my puzzle. Like that was very painful. It was very hurtful. And that's like a whole nother story. I'm not going to dive into that story because that has like the story of myself and my oldest daughter has its own legs, right? Like it
Oh
has
gosh,
its
yes.
own like it's its own package,
Yep.
like that we would have to undo. So I'm not going to go dive into that. I just want to honor there was
Yes.
a lot that impacted me in the world regarding her and I and how that story played out,
Yes.
and to where it is today. So like it's both hard and painful and exhausting and devastating all the way to today where it is exquisite and beautiful and connected and like in all the ways that I dreamed of it
Yep.
being, and here we are, right?
Yep.
So um but I do want to say like I'm there are these things as parents that we judge ourselves for that I think this is going to be an important part of the conversation. Like the healing journeys included my kids. So we'll go there in a minute.
Yep.
But so
100%.
like I have her, like I'm doing okay. There's some ups and downs her first few years of life, that I really struggled with mental health when she was about 2.5. I had to make some decisions so that she was going to be safe and while I was trying to figure it out. Um, and when she was a little over 5, I met my first, not my first, but my husband at the time, and now ex-husband and best friend, who I
Mhm.
ended up having 2 more children with. So in the meantime, when she was younger, I didn't really use a lot of substances, but I still had lots of impulsive behaviors with um actions and all. Like I ended up doing like some crazy things. Like I would get in my car and I'd drive across country, or like
Yeah.
I'd just go up north for 2 days, or in Arizona because I grew up in Arizona, and then like I would, or I'd go to California for a week, or like there was just these things I was doing that like that I called them itchy feet. It was like the only way to like ground myself was to get the
Mhm.
hell out. And
Mhm.
so then I meet the 2 younger kids' dad, who I'd known forever, and we kind of reconnect and like kindle this like really whirlwind, like amazing romance. He's a fantastic human. Shout out to him.
Mhm.
And I got an amazing father. And I have these 2 lovely children, a little guy and a little girl, and we kind of rocked it. But we were also from kind of the same ilk, the same era, the same music, the same
Mhm.
cultures, the same like we had all this stuff that we shared really similarly. And there was a lot of permissiveness going on around like what we did and how we did it and substances. And like, I think that, when I look back, I'm like, whatever made it okay for us? Like, what were we thinking, like, but like, I think when I look back, I think like, I don't think we ever thought it would go where it went. I think we thought, and this is the
Oh
great
yeah.
lie of substance use disorder
Oh yeah.
is that somehow we've got it under control, and that somehow I because I can stay away from it for a few days or a couple of months or whatever, that I'm okay. And like the reality was that eventually that like perpetuated itself until I was eating my own tail all the time because I had chosen some substances that were really hard to shake.
Yeah.
Or I like to say my chemistry chose them, because all the things I had touched prior to that I didn't really like them.
Yes.
But the ones that I found really worked for me, and the way
Yes.
that my mood worked, the way that my chemistry was, like I really felt like I'd found a glove per se. And in all of this is like a mental health. There's like trauma. There's a lot of uh, I would say depressive mood. There's like a lot of anxiety, and a little bit of like um I don't know. I mean, maybe like I don't have a formal diagnosis in that way, but like I think, and I don't really want to talk about like I said, diagnoses, but like when I talk about depression, I'm not talking about the diagnosis of depression, because that's
Okay.
very real and it's very, very specific.
It is. Yeah.
I'm talking about like low mood, apathy, complete like annihilation of my inner self while
Yeah.
that was happening, and then the opposite of that would happen. Then I would be like excited and elated and like all these things. So like I think there's this part of me that was always trying to find a balance.
Yeah.
I craved it in my physical realm, I craved it in my inner realm, I craved it in my brain, I craved
Yeah.
it, and along the way I have these children, and they are like soothing that part of me. They bring me a place to ground. And
Yes.
then in the process of my substance use disorder, I'm having this volatility with myself because I'm moving away from them while I'm being grounded with them. And like it was so dichotomous and
Yes.
painful, because I knew who I was inside all the way, and I knew what I was meant to be doing, but I couldn't get there.
Mhm.
And that
Mhm.
kind of was like, if I could say this, was like that all the time for me for
Yep.
years. And so that split mind, that split everything was like, it was just the theme of my life. Like if
Mhm.
I wasn't okay, I was
Mhm.
awful. Right. Like, and so I think kind of sums it up, because by the time I think the youngsters were like maybe 6 and 4, 7 and 5. Um, but I got clean in 2005. So, um, after a lot of opportunities and attempts at treatment, 12-step programs, detoxes, all this stuff, like one of the things I think early on was they didn't really talk about mental health with substance use. They talked about it, you have to do it separately. And if you did it the same, like it was like some weird place and some weird state that you didn't want to go to away from your family. So
Yeah.
I think what happened was I just was done. I'd been done for a long time. I just couldn't stop. And
Yeah.
then some things started to happen and fell into place that landed me in a position to make a decision. And, some people might look at my story, and I don't really care about this part, but some people look at my story and they're like, well, of course you stay clean. You had like a major medical issue that had happened and you had to like get clean and stay clean in order to manage that medical condition. And I'm like, go out in the world and interview addicts and they'll tell you it doesn't matter.
Yep. I was gonna say that it could be the worst thing you ever think of in your entire life. And at the
Yep.
end of the day, your chemistry, and I love that you put it this way, your chemistry in combination with traumas and dramas and conditioning, etc.,
Yep.
it's going to say that it can do it no matter what. Oh, it's fine. I can do it anyways. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
It
Yep.
doesn't matter, and that's what it kind
Yep.
of that was my experience with addiction. It was very similar to this. Is like I was having these extreme lows and extreme highs and nothing in
Hmm.
between. All I wanted
Yep.
was balance, and these drugs gave me the
Yep.
idea and the feeling that I had balance. And
Yeah.
so even though if I knew way back in the back of my mind or deep down in my heart and soul that this is probably not that great,
Yeah.
it's probably
Somewhere
not
around
that
there.
great. But I want to I would prefer this over what I've been dealing with.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
that's such an
so
important piece.
yeah.
Like I went in, as you know, I went to school finally and got my substance use disorder counseling certification. And like we can talk a little bit about that in a second, but like one of the things I thought was so important for me to do, and when I was doing that work early on, was like identify that it worked until it didn't,
Yep.
right? It was
Yep.
working. Like it had this component. It did what we needed it to do, and I need to honor that part of it.
Sure.
And then there's a place where it crosses the line,
Mhm.
right?
And
Maybe
and it
it's
and it happens so slowly yet so fast at the same time.
yeah. And then it starts to trump all your values and your ethics and like
Yes.
so everybody
Yeah.
could probably fill in the blanks around what my story looked like during my using years, because if you know someone or you are going through it, you probably have pieces that I've been through.
Yeah.
But I also am really, really, really well aware as someone who's in recovery and has been for many years that my journey isn't your journey, and what worked for me might kill you, and like you've got to find the people and the ways to help you find your path. And so I'm like very, very, very clear about that, because a lot of people, I don't want anybody to think I'm like preaching my direction the way that I did it, because it's
Right.
absolutely not who I am at all.
Right. Right.
um and actually, started off in abstinence-based treatment places that I did the work, and I was like, this doesn't quite fit with who I really am as a human and what I want to bring to the table, right? And so, my journey of recovery has been like, some not so great choices in relationships,
Mhm. Mhm.
but like somehow maintaining my parenting relationships and working on healing those relationships and coming back to my children, with a little bit better of a head on my shoulders, not great, but better. And working on, oops, there goes my headphone. Working on, the pieces of the puzzle that like felt really important, and like every time in relationship with someone else, whether it was a friend or someone in the rooms or someone at work or romantic or whatever, like our healing happens in relationship to others and to ourselves,
Yes.
and into the environment. So I think like the one thing that I tell people I did really well is show up. Like that's the thing I did perfectly. Like, look, I am far from perfect, but I'll show up for it. Like
Mhm.
you got feedback for me, I'm gonna show up for it. Like, and I
Mhm.
think I did that really, really well, especially with the kids.
Mhm.
Um, from a very young age, I didn't parent from guilt. When I got clean, I didn't. It was like, no, we gotta get this right as a family, and we I'm not going to give you everything you want because I did you harm. We're gonna heal the wound, not band-aid it.
And that is very clear as somebody from the outside looking in, that's very clear in your family. Like the
Yeah.
behaviors and the actions and the way in which you all navigated that and
Mhm.
continue to navigate yourselves, that is very evident. There was
I
always
love that.
and always has been an excessive, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean an excessive or like a real prioritization. Is that a word?
There you go. That's the right
Um,
word.
of
That's a rough one to say.
yeah, it is of authenticity. And I think that's because
Yeah.
your journey and every single human being on this planet, I fully believe we come to this planet with different gifts and different abilities and different purposes. I don't think we come here with
Hmm.
just one. That would be super
Right.
reductionist for how,
Also terrible. Thank you.
and also
No
terrible.
thanks.
So we're very complex and expansive creatures. So I think our experiences have to match
Okay.
that. And your experience of removing the muck, which happened, addiction kind of created like a safe almost
Hmm.
where everything on top of you was just muck and muck and muck. Over time
Hmm.
you were putting on yourself to cover up what you were really feeling, which was probably
Yeah.
this like kind of like a crab and like it's without a shell, just like
Yeah.
things raw and everything's like bruisey and
Yeah.
you can barely touch me and it like is a whole thing.
Yep.
So in your family, and in mine, and this is I think where we kind of relate the most, is like you have to come back to yourself at some point. And coming
Mm.
back to yourself is definitely not suppressing it. It's definitely not allowing yourself to choose behaviors and actions that are against that authentic self and against your truths and against your values. It's something that goes with that when we were first talking before we started recording, um, was like having these markers, like people, places, things, having these markers in
Yep.
your life that kind of are these catalysts, but I also view them as like when you go bowling and you have the rails up. I kind of feel
Yeah.
like, we're like this in life and we're doing this, and there's like,
Hmm.
oh, bumped into the thing.
Yep.
Oh shit. Okay, we need to like
Yep.
realign.
Yep. Yep.
And I think kids, people, places, things, but kids in particular, as you've mentioned, are and family, and people who really
Hmm.
love you, your tribe, they are incredible markers for whether you're on course with your authenticity or not, especially if they themselves are living in their authenticity. And children, as we know, that's all they
Hmm.
know to do.
Yeah.
They're in their
Yeah.
authenticity all the time, so long as it's not being shunned, right? You would hope.
Right.
Um,
One would hope.
one would hope. Like you
Not
have a
always the
kid.
story.
No,
Yeah.
it's definitely not. But I think having kids, my experience of that has definitely been that they are grounding as well, and they act as incredible markers for whether or not you are in alignment with your truths and your values and
Yeah.
your real self. So I think that's such a
Yeah.
beautiful and profound thing to mention for sure.
Yeah. I think like when I look back, because I was 32 when I got clean, right?
Mhm.
Um, so now y'all kind of can figure out my age. So and I don't really care. I'm 51.
Yes,
Um,
age is beautiful.
and fabulous. But
Mhm.
I think like what feels really important from what you're saying is that authenticity required from me some digging. Um, and where that led me back to was that 7-year-old.
Yes.
And so I find it, I want to make that connection because we started it off and I was like, I gotta tell you about her because
Yeah.
she was something amazing.
Mhm.
And I wonder sometimes what she would have got up to had not all this other stuff been going on,
For
right? I'm
sure.
like, who, right? But what's really, really cool is I get to see that now
Yes.
because because I've stayed clean, because I've done the work around my mental health, because I show up unapologetically myself, not meaning that I go around harming people because I'm in a mood.
Right.
When I say unapologetic, because people do that, they're like, I'm unapologetically me. And I'm just like, okay,
It's
you're
like that's not it.
exploding
Yep.
goop all over us. Back the hell up.
Yep.
being unapologetically myself means to me that I've done some work and that I'm living according to my like I've broken down this like and then in people there's a lot of people on this planet that think this way. I'm not alone in this. There's a lot of us to this one like fulcrum, and it
Yes.
is do the least amount of harm possible.
Mhm.
This world is hard. You don't know who you're touching. You don't know who you're talking to. You don't know what wounds are there. You have no idea. There's a million things I'm going to tell you today, and there's a million things still about me you're never going to know. So you could approach me and tell me hi, but don't tell me about my story,
Mhm.
right? Because you don't know if you could hurt me.
Mhm.
And I think that do the least amount of harm possible is when I am unapologetically myself, when I am fully in my values and my ethics. And I'm not saying morals, values and ethics. I'm doing that
Yep.
intentionally. I'm very intentional with my words,
Mhm.
is because I know my words can hurt,
Yep.
right? Because I know that let's do this one too a little bit. My Sagittarius flare,
Sure.
because I'm a December baby, has a sharp tongue.
Mhm.
She's like, when you look in the word drink the things around Sagittarius, it's like the sharp tongue and honesty. And I'm like,
The
yeah,
bluntness. Yeah.
I can hurt some people. And I didn't like that. So like I
Mhm.
changed it because I also don't like to be spoken to that way. And so then I only surround myself with people who are going to speak to me kindly and lovingly. And when they don't, they come back and we work on it and we figure it out. And so I think that for me, that like do the least amount of harm possible fulcrum has been like where I live from the most unapologetically. Like there's people like, you're too kind, you're too this. Look, I got boundaries for days.
Yeah.
Like they're mine. I don't tell you what to do. I tell me what to do. You can
Mhm.
like it or not like it. I don't really care. But the bottom line is that I do it from a place of least amount of harm possible. And if my boundary hurts you, you got to look at it,
Yeah.
right? Like you got to
Yeah.
think about you because that's not me. I'm doing something ultimately that is my truth that is connected to do the least amount of harm possible. And that means that maybe I hurt this person, but I don't hurt these other 50. And that's the least amount of harm possible.
Right.
Right. And I think people like can get that kind of mixed up in their head when you say that. It's like, well, then you shouldn't hurt anybody. And it's like, no, sometimes I have to make hard decisions.
Yes.
Sometimes you need the hard feedback. But honesty without compassion is brutality. I learned that early in my recovery.
Mhm.
And there's no reason to be an asshole. There's just really no reason to be an asshole
Yeah.
at all,
Yep.
ever on this planet. I don't care who you are, what color you are, where you come from. Like I show up with kindness and grace and love and compassion. And I'm going to hold firm and I'm going to hold a boundary when you're crossing those lines with me about how I prefer to be spoken to, how I prefer you to approach me. And like you don't get to be big and scary at me. Like that's just not okay.
Yeah.
And I work in the field of people who are experiencing illness and I know that they're coming at me with the behavior that they're coming at with me because I'm safe. They know they know I'm going to love them afterwards, but I'm also
That's
going
a
to
big
hold them
piece of it.
accountable for it,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think so like for my journey, it's been like show up because that's half the battle, right? Like how do you just like and then like how do you for me, how do I regain ground as a mom, right? And I did that. I did that. My kids went to meetings with me when I was early in like for years. I watched that play out in their life.
Mhm.
And then as they got older, I was able to recognize things that were going on with them and try to support them and work with them.
Right.
And now we're going to dive into a little bit harder of a story, which is your beautiful cousin
Mhm.
and my son, so I have these three children, plus many what I call my bonus kids that I've helped along the way in various areas of time periods in their life. So
Mhm.
shout out to all my bonus kids. Um, because they're everywhere.
They certainly
Because one
flocked to you. We knew how to
they
find
do,
them.
and I have to tell you this. It's so funny because in my head I'm like this punk rock diva, and I'm not, by the way. But in reality, I am like the diva mom. Like
Really,
seriously, like especially when everybody got to adolescence, it
absolutely.
was crazy,
Absolutely.
and so I really find like there's just this place where no matter how I showed up as a mom, it didn't matter, and so my son and you were born about 9 months apart, which was really funny because all of my kids and my siblings' children are all 9 months apart. It's so weird, and all
So
of
weird.
my siblings' children are 9 months younger than all of my children, which I think is like, or around 9 months younger than
I
all my
never
children.
even put that together. That's
Yeah, isn't that
crazy.
a trip? Isn't that a trip?
That's
So
weird.
your oldest and
Yeah.
my oldest, our oldest brother and
Um,
my oldest daughter, right?
oh my
Same, 9 months
God, that's
difference.
crazy.
You and Dev, and then your
Yeah,
little brother
young
and
adult.
my
That's
youngest,
so
right?
weird.
Isn't that crazy? So,
That's so cool. Wow.
so I just think that's really interesting, by the way. So it's
Yeah,
just a fun point. Um,
yes.
but so you two were very close in age, and I think the dream was always that you all would be raised very close together.
Yeah.
And despite that not happening, because I moved away to the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, you all felt very connected. And so, he struggled a lot, and I would venture to say that he might identify as they if he were still here.
Yeah.
Um, he was really struggling with a lot of mental health. I'm pretty sure that he was drinking a lot. I found a lot of empty bottles. Um, I don't know if that was like current or former bottles, but I can make some assumptions. But I do definitely know the mental health was the strongest piece in that. And I think his own thoughts, his own gender identity, and he identified as pansexual, which he shared with me later. And he was like, I never thought it was really important, Mom, to tell you. And I was like, I mean, it would just help me to help understand you and
To
like where you're
understand
coming
you.
from, right? Like, I don't care.
But I think that
But
shows his authenticity, where it's just like, this is just a fact of my life. It's not something I
yeah,
feel I need to explain.
yeah, it just like came out in conversation one day. I was like, oh, good to know. And he's like, you
Like,
sound excited. I was like, no, I'm just excited to know one more piece of information about you. You're my kid.
yeah.
Like, oh my Lord. So, but I think like, you know, uh, I watched him really go through it, right? I watched his like what I would call psychosis. I would watch it happen and watch his like I have a lot of questions about all of that. And, you know, we lost him in 2015. We got about from his first attempt at taking his life, we got about 2 years after that. So it was 13 the first time he tried, he almost completed. Um, in 14 we made some major changes in our life, and continued to seek help. And in 15, in July of 2015, he was gone. I came home and he was gone.
Mhm.
And his father had found him. So I think like, you really see what you're made of when something like that happens. And he and I had had lots of conversations. I had this weird feeling, I think, from the time he was born that I wasn't going to get to have him for very long. I kind of always knew. And even as time went on, I know the stats. I'm in the field of mental health and substance use disorder. I'm a clinician. So I'm like, I know what the stats are for a young man who's already almost completed. I know what the potential of this, like, I might not be able to save him from himself.
Mhm.
And so I made sure to have those really important conversations about what he taught me, about how much love he brought me, about what the beauty he brought to my life, so that when he did, if he did, which it became a when,
Yeah.
um, that he didn't leave with unfinished business.
Yeah.
That felt really important to me. Um,
I
and
want
it
to, I
could have
want
gone
to,
on.
I want to
Yeah,
say
go for
on
it.
that, not to cut you off, but I want to say on that, I think that connects, what comes to mind when you say that is this connection to that 7-year-old that had this
Yeah,
deep, deep fucking wisdom and connection to the divine. And that message was going to be channeled to you about your
yeah,
children in
yeah,
general, also
yeah,
about them. Because one, you were, for whatever reason, and I don't say this as like, obviously, I don't say this as in like you're any less or more capable than another human being, but I think that your facilities, your bodily systems, your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual capabilities in this time, in this place, allowed for those messages to come through so that you could be what he needed to be, you to be in his life.
yeah, yeah.
And that is a super gnarly thing,
It's
like
rough, dude.
super gnarly thing.
So now let's take this back there again, right? So well done. Great connection. I fucking love you.
I love you too.
You're gonna fucking get me every time, aren't you? Um,
It's my job. It's your job too.
it's my job too. So, I 100% believe that all of my children were brought to me because I needed them as much as they needed me
Oh my gosh,
for
100%.
who we're meant to be.
Oh my God.
And because they're all, I mean, all of them, the youngest, fucking fierce. She's fierce. Fucking fierce. Don't mess with her, by the way.
I would
She's the
say,
one I'm the most scared of.
I was gonna say she's the one you really don't want to piss off
No, don't
because
mess with her. Don't fuck with her.
the intelligence there too is like, oh my God. And I love her
But
to
I
death.
think I think she struggles a little bit with the same thing that I do, right? Like, is
For-
this like, sorry, Z, I'm gonna talk a little bit about you and when you're not here, but I'd tell her the same thing if she was here. But
right.
like, same thing, right? So like, yeah, absolutely. Now take that 7-year-old, right?
Mm,
I don't think that depth ever changed. I just didn't have the language and time on the planet
right.
to like speak to it properly, but it's always been there. It's
Oh yeah.
always been there. I was the kid that was like sitting on the street corner under the lamppost light in the 80s, that listened to my friends like cry over their boyfriends or their mom or their dad or being abused, or like they sought me out. Same when I was using substances and I was houseless, I was
Hmm.
living under bridges. I
Hmm.
was the one that was holding the women who were missing their children. No one was holding me, but I was holding them. And that's fine. But I always found myself in those places to the point where like I will never forget, like my drug dealer at the time looked at me and he was like, "You don't belong out here."
Hmm.
And the day that I went to the hospital to get clean, he said, "Don't come back."
Hmm.
He's like, "You don't belong out here. You're too good for this seedy underworld." He's like, "They need you elsewhere." And
Yeah.
he knew. So like I always got these messages along the way. And so,
Yes.
and even from my kids. And so then you go and I've raised these beautiful children, and there's this boy who like has my heart, and like in a way that I can't even describe. I don't even know. You're about to figure it out.
I
But
know I'm about to go through it too, and I can already
woo,
feel the
woo,
intensity of
woo.
it. I mean, it was intense. Obviously, there's a
It's just
different
different.
relationship with every kid. They're individuals,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there is this sensation that I also get where it's like, whoa, like this is.
Yeah.
And Josh and I actually talk about this a lot. I feel like and this is regardless again of your gender identity, but
Yep.
the energy that you bring to this world, whether it leans feminine or masculine, we have both. But in this world, we live in a lot of like opposing. So let's just run with it.
Yep.
A woman giving birth to a a man who continues to identify that way, there's like a relation, there's a balancing act that happens there
Yep.
energetically. And I think the
Yep.
same thing happens with uh like daughters and their fathers, is like there's this,
Yep.
or whoever is the masculine energy in their life, there's this balance of energy. And so there's a
Yep.
very, very special and unique connection that happens, and it's constantly getting tinkered with throughout their life in different ways. But like I really feel like certain people have certain gendered kids, certain energetic, I shouldn't say gender, that's not the right word, certain energetically
Yeah.
positioned
It's the
children.
energy. It's
Yeah,
the energy more than the gender, I think is what you're trying to say, right?
exactly. And it's like
Yeah.
that energy is supposed to come into your world to balance yours, to
Hmm.
you to balance theirs. Like there is
Hmm.
always this working together thing, so long as you're working in your authentic nature and you're working to be a conscious parent and whatever that means to you. um
Hmm.
and I think that's exactly what Dev was for a lot of us, not just his
Yeah.
parents, but his
Yeah.
siblings and his
Yeah.
cousins and his friends and his relationships. I mean,
Yeah.
probably even people in the store, the
Yeah.
moments where we didn't see him or any of us
Yeah.
saw it. It's like this person had an energy about them that was so unique and so different than everybody else. And it was
Absolutely.
probably not an easy thing. Well, we know now it wasn't an easy thing to walk around as, he was kind of like this. I don't know. I always think of him as like a moth. It's like this different, just, can be this
Yeah.
really beautiful thing. And some people are really afraid of it, and some people love it, and some people are like gravitate towards it. And he was just one of those types of people. It was really hard
Yeah. No,
to not love him.
it, it was like, he was like so unassuming, right?
Yeah.
Like it was like, like we all have plenty of ego. So,
Oh, oh yeah.
right. Right. When I think of him, I always think of this like very unassuming, um, energy. Like he just kind of, good, bad, right, or wrong. Like he just was. He just
Yep.
was in his place. He just is. He was like he was just being, and like the stories. And I do want to just put a little thing here. Like if you're thinking of harming yourself, like please, like know that there's help and that we love you, and like you can call 1-800 suicide, and we'll link some stuff later in the
Yes, definitely going to link a lot of resources.
um like we're not talking about this from a place of glorification. Like he's missed deeply,
So much.
deeply.
Oh yeah.
Um and you know, with like I was saying that like what a weird coincidence, which is never a coincidence for you and I, that like we've had to reschedule this a few times, and that his birthday was Friday, you know, and it would have been his 26th birthday or 27th birthday.
Yeah, 27th.
27th
I'm
birthday.
turning
And
27.
I, you know, so 9 years
Yeah.
almost, right? And like, so how did we get here, right? Like loved him fiercely, like like with all of you, honor your guys' truth, right?
Mhm.
Um, and you know, I when I look back, I see, you know, not only the stories that people told me afterwards or the ways that I have connections with people that he loved and they loved him, that I get to now hold those relationships, which was a great gift for me, but also to hear how he showed up for others because he learned how to show up for me and
That's
from his own unassuming energy.
that's so insanely cool and beautiful. Still, again, want to point out, like you said, that this situation, somebody taking their own life, somebody
Yeah.
struggling with mental health to this extent, and this is something my mom has embedded in me. It's like you can love somebody in every right way, and
Doesn't matter.
it's still going to be their journey. And that's a
Mhm.
really hard thing to accept just as a friend or as a cousin or as a sibling even, but when it's your parent, your mother, your dad, these people who
Yeah.
literally made you, created you, brought you into this world, now
Yeah.
seeing take yourself out, it's like it's just a, I'm sure, a whirlwind of emotions. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, because I mean we did a lot of talking when this happened. Obviously, we
Yeah.
came and visited, and there was a lot of conversation for a long time. And I'm just curious how this affected your mental health and your healing journey, and how you didn't fall back into addiction, and how you didn't fall back into the impulsivity, and how you, I'm sure, at moments in time chose, I'm feeling this way and I'm going to do that. I'm going to eat the whole Oreo pack or whatever.
Yeah.
Harmless to super harmful, whatever.
Right.
That's part of the process
That's
too.
part of the process for real. Well, I think first of all, I I want to say that the pain trumps the love
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for you probably and for me along the way where the pain trumped the love, that I couldn't feel it. And I often think for him, he was always very clear with me how much he loved me, and like it was never, he didn't leave because of anything that happened between us. I'm sure it impacted him. To be very frank, I'm very clear with myself that my conduct impacted him.
Sure.
And my absences impacted him. But where we had gotten by the time he was 18 was not that. So I want
Right.
to be very loud and clear that we worked very hard as a family, as we stated earlier, to like really work on that. And I also really understand my impact on my kids' lives. And what I don't understand, I have yet to understand, and I'm open to that. So
Right.
because truth reveals itself in the layers that you can withstand. And so one of the things that I remember saying to myself, because remember I was in grad school and I was like at the end
Yes,
of grad
you were right
school.
at the end.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was at the end of grad school. And so I like had to take time off. And I just remember everyone else was just like so fucked off. They were so fucked off. And I just was sitting there, and I just remember like sitting in the middle of my backyard in Portland, and the sun was shining because it was July, August, and it was warm, it was hot. And I was like, I was traveling. I don't know how else to explain it except for I was traveling in my brain, and I was like
100%.
not in, I was in the yard, but I wasn't in the yard. And I had this moment of like I was trying to find the thread of how I was going to get through this. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through. I thought I was going to lose my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened my eyes and I looked around me and everybody's doing what they know how to do to get by. And I was like, I don't connect to anybody else's path here right now. I've got a job to do. And it became very clear to me that all the pins on the map that I had placed, those meaningful life events, those things that I felt valuable to me, all those things, they fell down on the ground. I actually have started writing a book that has that analogy in there. All those push pins are on the ground, except for a few. And the
Mm-hmm.
only thing that's left are the most important people in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then and that fulcrum,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Everything else is gone. Everything. I don't, do I still want to finish grad school? Do I still want to work in the industry I chose? Can I still show up for it the way I thought I could? Can I still be a mom? Can I be a partner? Can I stay clean? And what I decided right then is I picked up one pin and I said, I am here.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked up at my bestie and I said, I need some strawberry lemonade cake from what is the Red Robin? They were having, and that's all I would eat for like a week.
There you go. The Oreo pack. There you
The
go.
Oreo pack. So, but that I am here,
Oh my
that
gosh.
fulcrum,
Yes.
and those people, and I'm in the middle of this yard on a sunny day, and I'm probably sunburning because I hadn't gotten a lot of sun. And so I made a decision and I was like, there's not enough drugs or alcohol in this world. There's not enough sex in this world. There's not enough food in this world. There's not enough anything in this world to make me feel better.
Yep.
Will make it better for me and everyone else around me is if I open the curtains, I unlock the doors and I let the light in and I just let that keep happening over and over. And so like, how do I talk about this openly? It's not 9 years. I was talking about it like this 9 years ago.
Mhm.
So
That's
if you
very
came to
true.
my house and you could show up, cool. If you couldn't, cool. I got you. I get it, man. Like, no, it's not for everybody.
Yep.
And I just remember being like, no, no stigma, no shame. And if you got that for me, get the hell out. I
Yep.
don't need that in my life. You're not
Yep.
allowed anymore. Like literally just said, I am here. We will heal and we will be okay. And I was crushed. I was crushed.
Of
And I
course.
don't think my girls knew if I was going to come back from that. I
Yes,
think
I'm
they were
sure.
scared. I
I'm
think
sure.
their dad was scared, right? Like, I think everybody was scared. And I looked at them and I was like, don't be scared. I'll be all right.
Mhm.
Right. Because I
Mhm.
know what he would tell me. He'd be like, the same thing he told me over the years. Don't ever stop, mom. Hey, mom, you haven't been to a meeting this week. Are you going? Hey, mom, I love you. Do what helps. Right. I heard him in my head. When
Yep.
I went to, I'd had a Hawaii trip planned with my bestie. It turned into a grief trip, which was really interesting. And we can talk about that offline another day. But what I remember like going out to swim with the sea turtles and being like, dude, God, I wish you were here. I'd never been to Hawaii. It was fucking beautiful. And I was laying on this boat and I just come up from swimming with these giant fucking turtles. And I was like, he would have loved that. And because it was clear water and he would have thought it was great. He also probably would have been a little terrified. He might not have gone in because he didn't really like the deep water and like natural bodies of water,
Yeah.
just by the way. And so, and then I just heard this voice in my head as you wouldn't have come if I was here.
Mm.
Right. And like every time I turn around, he's like, I wouldn't have been well enough for you to leave and go do this. You wouldn't have finished. You wouldn't have done this. You would have stayed behind to help me. And like, not from a place of me, but like him, like from the conversations he and I had had, like what he wanted for me as his mom and a human being, like that was the kind of human he is and
Yeah.
was, and the spirit he is. So like even to this day, right? I have these conversations on Friday with him on the way to work, tears running down my face, like, hey, and he talks to me through music. If you think that's weird, maybe you need another channel. I don't
Yeah.
know, because
Might
we
not
think
be
that's
might not be
cool.
the place for you. Yeah, 100%. Well, energy is frequency. So to me, that's
Yep.
like that's a huge. I mean, that's real for me on every level. 100%.
Mm-hmm. And he was just telling me like, because I just like been through a bunch of stuff these last few years, and he's just like, good job, mom.
Mhm.
Good job showing up for things even when it's hard still. And like stay in the course, right? Speaking truth to power and like, standing, being an ally where you can be, stepping back and giving space for people who don't usually get space, being a voice for those of us who aren't here. And like, or who don't have one or don't feel like they can open their throats and their mouths yet. And I'm not a super vocal person anymore in that way, but I will and when I'm needed. And like I think my healing journey and how I stayed clean, how I stayed a mom, how I stayed engaged is just literally one moment at a time.
Mhm.
Like I'm sure I've made all kinds of mistakes, right? And
Of
and
course.
Bestie always says, Bestie's like, you get to pull the dead kid card your whole life, right? So I'm like,
Right.
I choose those moments wisely when it's real and it's actually happening to me,
Yeah.
versus like, other versions of that, and maybe I could have like turned my attention towards advocacy or work in that area, but that's like not where my heart is. My heart isn't in the pain of it. My heart is in the healing of it. And
Yes.
like that
Yes.
was his answer. That wasn't my answer. That was his answer. And like I honor his answer. I tell people, and this is another one of those things, I would have held his hand. I don't give a shit, man. That was my boy. And so, but what made it so I didn't fall was all the right things happened in a row up until that point so that I didn't have any regrets.
And that's huge because so often with people who leave, there's a lot of unfinished business. That's not to say that there's probably still, I mean, there's an
There
unf
is
there's an unfinished life, right?
unfinished life versus unfinished business. Thank you for the distinction. Yes.
Yeah, and that's really hard to grapple with being in the physical plane because we are physical beings in this space and we
Yeah.
want to have that physical experience of the other people that we love so dearly and that connection and that ability to connect with one another doesn't go away with death. In fact,
Nope.
I think it's heightened in a
It
very,
is.
very specific way if you're open to that and you're able to
Yeah.
have discernment between what is like your ego driving something versus what is just really
It
happening.
comes, yeah, and it comes and goes, right? Like there's moments where I'm way closer to it than others. I'm distracted by the
So true.
physical plane. And I think like when I look back too, I think the things that like lit up in my surroundings that day in the middle of the yard were the kids,
Yeah.
right? Right? Were how do I show up for them and help them through this? I don't even
Mhm.
know how I'm gonna do this, but I'm at least gonna not, I'm gonna do my best to not disappear too big, too often, too much, because I knew I was gonna have to do some stuff to take care of myself. Now,
Of course, of
if I'm
course.
honest, like, have I done all that work? Nope. Is it ever gonna be done? Nope.
No.
That's mine to carry, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And like, there's this statue of this woman, and it's a big hole in the middle.
Mhm.
And I
I know
just
exactly
remember,
what you're talking about.
you know which one I'm talking about? Like, I
Yes.
remember seeing a picture of that, and I just like remember sobbing. And I remember being like, that's an okay hole to have.
Yeah.
And I was sharing that with someone. They're like, why is it okay? And I was like, because I love big. I
Yep.
love big and
And
I
that's
love
a
deep.
representation of how big and deep.
Yep. And
Yeah.
so like, and so with the girls, right? I get to have this beautiful relationship where he's alive in our lives still, right?
Very so.
We talk about him all the damn time. He's
Mhm.
in every story. Even if he's not there, we're like, we wonder what he would be doing. We talk like he loved video games. So we were like, Pokemon, right? Like, what would he be thinking right now with the new Pokemon games? Or,
Yeah. Would he
like,
be into
what would,
this? Would he think this is
yeah,
stupid? What would his, yeah,
what would
100%.
his, oh, yeah, he'd probably just excel at it and move on, right? Because he was a whiz. But like,
Yeah.
he, but like with them, like, what's been really, really cool is the way that the girls and I have come together and the relationships we built. And I now have a granddaughter who's 6, and the way that I get to do relationship with all of them and with all of you, and like, because I didn't let it take me out. I didn't let it get me loaded. That was totally a choice,
Oh yeah. It was there.
right? I think everybody was scared I might make that choice, but I think everybody knew, because I had like 10 years at that time,
Right.
was like was like I don't know that anybody would have batted an eyelash had I done that, but I was like, hell no, I want to honor him. I want to honor him with a clear mind and a clear heart. You know, like I want to honor my relationships with my girls with a clear mind and a clear heart. I want to see what's next for us because this isn't the end of our story. He's a part of our story and I'm going to have a relationship with him forever. But like recovery for me is, and like healing for me has been all about my truth, like the truth of who Renee really is. Like, who is Renee really? Not what does Renee do? Renee does a lot of things.
Yeah.
Renee, who Renee really is, like on the core, is that 7-year-old, like
Yeah.
just filled with love. I'm just filled with love. I am filled with joy. And sometimes the world puts, and I let it put debris over my inner glow stick. And then I have to clean it off regularly and like
Mhm.
light it back up again, shake it, put it back in the freezer, you know, like all the things, right?
And
But like, I think,
that's that continuous
yeah,
back to that authenticity, back to that inner truth, back to the this is showing up. It's showing up.
yeah, yeah.
It's
And that's
literally
like,
showing up.
that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Like, that's literally like the relationship that I have with the youngest at this point is like off the charts. Like I couldn't wish for any more for the way that we connect and the way
Mm.
that we see each other. Cause this was the little girl that used to sit on the side of my hot bathtub because she wasn't allowed in with me and she'd swing her feet in the hot bath and eventually end up in there anyways
Yep.
and talk to me about spiritual world. So I know that that kid's had that since she was like 2 or 3.
Yep.
She was aware then. And then the oldest, right, is going through her own spiritual and growth and journey these last 5-10 years and like really diving in this way that's just been like, oh my god, like the link between her and I is just like and I'm like,
It's
had I
otherworldly.
made,
Oh, yeah.
it is otherworldly, and like had I made any other decision, what would have happened to them or me, or like even with you, like what if I chose a different path? Like I was very clear about my assignment
Yep.
at that point. I think like when you talk about assignments and purpose, I love that like thing. Like I understood the assignment, like because it makes me
Mhm.
happy, but not from the way that people use it, but from like the spiritual perspective.
100%.
Like so, like this is the way I think about it. Like when I was 7, I knew my assignment, and it got fucked up by a bunch of grown-ups around me who had other fucking shit going on in their head. Let's be honest.
Yep.
And then I lost my way because the world is hard, and like the world is going to stay hard. So it's about learning to be exactly who you are in a world that's already hard.
Mhm.
And so when I figured that out and I like aligned all the things, I was like, there's no reason for me to ever not do that and just be and constantly becoming what I meant to be. And also understanding that part of my assignment is to be present the way I know how and like
Right.
be that light, whatever version of that you need for you,
Mhm.
right? In particular, like I know that you're watching. And I don't always know who's watching, but I know you're watching. I know
Mhm.
they're watching.
Mhm.
And I don't do it for that reason, but I know that had I taken a different path, that might have taken you guys, it might have derailed all of you because
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
who I am,
Yes.
right? I know the strength of my being in the room. I know the strength of my light in the room. And it's not from a place of ego, it's a place of understanding. So let me be very clear. This is not arrogance, right? If you know me, which you do, this is
Yeah.
not
No,
coming
not
from a
that.
place of arrogance. Like
Not
for me to even say that out loud on a podcast is like,
that.
it's going to come across arrogant, but say it anyways.
Yeah. It's
But like,
important.
yeah, it's really important to say, like, I know when I look back over 50 years, I go, oh, okay, I'm really glad I didn't take a left,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm so glad that I stayed the course because
Yep.
one of the things that I think is the most important thing that I give to people is permission
Mhm.
just to be who they are every moment. Like, I just started this new job. And it's like, I just want people to be who they are. Like, and when I talk to the people that I'm a leader in nonprofit organizations. And one of the things that I get continuous feedback from my staff over the years has been, thanks for showing up the way that you do and reminding us it's okay to just be who we are in the moment
Yep.
and showing us how to move through something even when it's hard. And
Yeah.
amen,
Yep.
amen, like, and what is that going to look like 50 years from now when I'm no longer here?
That's going
You
to
know?
be that's going to have been embedded in other people. And I think this is similar to the way that, Deb, your son, has impacted the world in not being here. Is there's that
Yeah.
continuation of his consciousness and his
Yeah.
energy and his spirit through all of us. Like I almost feel like
Yeah.
when we lose people, they leave pieces of themselves with us.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then we get to then live for those reasons and abilities and whatever it is. We're
Mm-hmm.
still living our own lives and being who we're meant to be and showing up who we're meant to show up as and what we're meant to offer this world.
Yeah.
But I think in a big way, you were a guide for him in this life, and then now he
Mm.
is a guide for you. And it's just so
It's pretty beautiful.
incredibly an overwhelming thing. A lot of people don't come to the place that you've come to, which is that of acceptance of what is, but
Yeah.
more so a determination to not live from what is, to not live from just solely your pain, but to live
Yeah.
from what it has provided you and enabled you to become, and
Yeah.
what has enabled and allowed other people around you to become. Um,
Yeah.
there's so many choices that we could make surrounding our pain. We can
Mm-hmm.
try to push away. We can try to manipulate it and make it into something that
Yeah.
it's really not. But ultimately, like when you face it head on, head the fuck on, and
Yeah.
you recognize the power in it, that it is a
Yeah.
catalyst for a lot of other aspects of who you are, that without certain events happening in our lives, we really, really, truly would never find the path that we're meant to. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there is solace in that because it becomes meaningful rather than just like almost like in vain, like
Yep.
having these painful experiences. It's like it is messed up, it's not okay, it shouldn't have to happen, blah, blah,
Absolutely.
blah, blah. Like, and you holding space for people and being permissive for people's experience of that, in that when they're in that process of like, this is fucked up and not okay and why is it happening to
Yeah.
me, that is part of the development into that resiliency and that ability
Yeah.
to see the purpose and see the meaning, and it not be the pain of it, again, not be the pain of it, but the love of it,
Yeah.
the realization that it has a point. Something
Mm-hmm.
that you learn in like hypnobirthing is
Mm-hmm.
this pain has a purpose.
Yeah.
And I have taken that and spread that out into like every
It's
of my
perfect.
life, because
It's perfect.
it makes it worth trying. It makes it worth showing up. Something that also came to mind when you were talking about light and like people's energy and being a light, um, or like your dealer at the time telling you don't belong out here, him even seeing that, seeing
Right.
beyond your physical and kind of touching into the depth of you. It's like when we are these big lights, and everyone has a light, it's our soul, it's your
Yep.
spirit, there's a lot of words for it, but like this inner blueprint of who you really are and how you're really supposed to be in this world, which you get to choose. There's again a multitude of options there.
Yep.
But
Yep.
when you are in touch with your light, I feel like to the extent that you and say I have been in our lives, you have to walk through the darkness to be able to see your own light.
Yeah.
And then other people in darkness will flock to you because you've become this light. Um,
Yeah.
and it's really hard because we have experiences that are super intense, super serious,
Yeah.
and super severe, like
Yeah.
movie level type shit.
Movie level. Yeah, for
And
real.
and it's easy to lose your light and get sucked into the darkness again. But
Yeah.
again, recognizing that there's purpose in the pain, that we can become more because of it. Like every new experience we have opens up new pieces of our DNA, therefore opening
Yeah.
up new pieces of neural communication and
Yep.
uh, just our
Yeah.
brain's ability to
Yeah.
facilitate experiences and be open to them and recognize them. So like
Yep.
I kind of I like taking this scientific approach, which I know you super
Yep.
appreciate as well,
Yep.
kind of combining it with this spiritual approach of like the evidence
Yep.
of my life, right?
Yep.
And I feel like um the journey is never ending, but you're certainly capable of these moments and these glimmers where like you had that moment in your backyard, you were like, I have a job to do. Like
Yep.
I'm still here. I'm still
Yep.
fucking here. So I still have to decide and choose what I'm
Yep.
gonna do with this time and space that I'm in. Um,
Yeah.
and I remember just a quick little side note before
Mm-hmm.
we kind of finish up a little bit, is I remember being at your dining table when we came to visit. We were doing a celebration of life for a few days.
Mm-hmm.
A common theme in my family on both sides. We do
Yep.
celebration. we do a little bit of the, the mourning and, putting them in their little places and whatever, but like
Right.
we do a lot of celebrating about them. And I think that's so
Yeah.
fantastic and beautiful. But I was sitting there just trying to eat something and I couldn't eat and I was just crying and crying and crying and crying. And you came over to me and you said, you have to eat. You said, you have to eat. You can't stop because he did. You're still here. You said that to me. And I was like, holy shit, Ola, this is like, first of all, I looked at you and was like, how are you even, what in the, like, you are an alien. The fact that you can be in that and
Well,
say that right now, which true, but
true.
it changed. That moment really made me realize, like, oh, whoa, okay, he's a lesson. He's a branch. He's a root and a
And a leaf.
and a leaf. He is.
Yeah, he's
He
all
is.
of them.
And
Yep.
I was like, oh, like it. You really
Yep.
triggered me to recognize what was the truth
Yep.
of the matter, which was we're still
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
We're still here. And I think that's like, the whole point of our conversation is not just to be like, what's your journey, Renee? La 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 la. Because,
Sure. Sure.
we all like to talk about ourselves to some degree, but I'm just like less so a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, Especially in like more public forums, which people are like, wow, you'd be great at it, which probably is true, but also meh, also fine. If that's what I'm needed to do and called to do. But like I think like what I think about when I look at the whole picture is the way that this body was designed and what I came here ready to do, and everything had to go the way it needed to. I had a choice every single moment, and some of those choices were to use drugs and
Mhm.
alcohol. Some of those choices were to be like choose the impulsive behaviors other than that to fix how I felt. And where I landed was to face exactly where I'm at in the moment, look at my surroundings and decide how I want to show up for myself.
Yeah.
And like I think the secondary, so I'm going to be this is where it's what I call selfless selfishness,
Hmm.
and that is I do this for me so I can do this for you. Right? Because if
Yeah.
I like that is like key, like there's that like fulcrum of do the least amount of harm, but the only way to do that is to do what I need to do for me in order to do that for you. And so like along the way, I've mistaken a lot of things for things they're not. But one thing I'm very, very clear on is that had I shown up in any other way, had I had I moved in any other way, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Right.
Exactly.
And like
Exactly.
I wouldn't get to be in myself in the way that I am. And sometimes that's really hard. And I want to be very, very frank because we're talking about some really hard topics. And I want to
Yeah.
say this out loud because I want the caveat. You know how I am.
Yeah.
And that is I am 9 years later.
Hmm. Hmm.
I am 19 years after the last time I used drugs. I am a lot of years later. My kids are grown. I have grandbabies. Like, I have a grandbaby. Like, there were moments of like despair and devastation. And like, I didn't know. But what I didn't do was act on those feelings.
Yeah.
Eventually, that's what I learned. If I learned nothing else, was not to act on the feeling and just to like sit and allow for it to be what it is. So, like, and that is the hardest thing for me because I'm very cerebral, I'm very scientific. So it's like very hard for me to like allow myself to be in those big, big, big feelings. But I also like know that those big feelings are the most important things to me becoming who I'm meant to be in the world. And I want to say, like, if you're like just hitting that mark, or if you're just going through something, like, I want people to hear this. Like, it's you just are where you are, and it sucks, and fucking sorry.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
there are folks in this world, and whatever way you choose to cope is the way you choose to cope. But come back to us, like, come back to us and remember you're here and that there's communities of people and collectives of people out there that will like hold your hand and walk you through, or maybe just show up for a day. Or maybe it's this podcast, like maybe it's just
See
this
what
moment.
happens. See what
Yeah.
happens. That's a huge thing
Yeah.
is in showing up. You we as humans think that we know every outcome that could possibly happen, and that's just
Nope.
not true.
It's so not true.
Like, trust me, you're not the whole, like,
Nope.
you're a piece of the universe, and you are your own universe, but you are not the universe. You are not the
Yep.
whole. You are
Yep.
a massively important piece.
Yep.
But the minute you limit yourself to the only things that you can perceive as the best outcome or the worst outcome, the minute
Yep.
you lose out on all of these other opportunities, and I don't mean they go away. I just mean you lose sight of them, and you
Yeah.
limit yourself to this moment. You limit to the moment. So it's
Yeah.
different when you're saying I'm here in the here and now. Something I do to
Yeah.
myself is I go, I am here right now with my
I
family.
am here right now. I am here right now.
And it's like when you
Yep.
do that, it's not saying this moment is all there is. It's saying this moment has choice, and choice is my way towards liberation of
Yep.
it feels like to be in this moment right now, because feelings are not all that we are. You and
Yep.
I, as you mentioned, we're very cerebral, so we can intellectualize shit all day
All
long.
the day long. All day long.
I could connect the dots, boop, 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 in seconds. Okay. It's not hard.
Out talk my therapist just a
Oh yeah.
little.
Oh yeah. But and there and my that's a whole other thing. My therapist is always like, why do you come here? And I'm like, what? But
I
you know,
actually need you. Thanks for listening. Yep.
yeah, I'm like, trust me, you're important.
Yep. Trust me.
But it's very different to emotionally process something, and finding
Yeah.
the moment and being present is definitely the I think the most relevant way to do that. So yes.
Absolutely. No, I want to say, like, 'cause you and I could talk for hours.
It's so
But I
true.
think that it's so true. Just so everybody knows, like,
Yeah.
we could talk for
Like this
hours.
is
It's
this
just,
is hard for us right now to
this is
like
hard for us to end the conversation right now. So
yeah.
we're trying to find a way to segue into ending right now. So
Yeah.
just hang in there with us while we figure it out. It's a little awkward for all y'all. Y'all are probably
For
like, we're
real.
done listening. And I'm like, we're not done talking. So
But
come
you
back
did it.
for,
Yeah.
part 5.
Real.
But I think, like, when you were talking, I was thinking about, years ago, I got that tattoo on my chest. I'm not going to show it right now, but it's a Poggiatura, which is grace note, right? And so this is really fits in with what you're saying, because is grace note in music, as you know, is both resonance and dissonance,
Yeah.
right? And so sometimes, like, I have to find the resonance, and sometimes I have to be the dissonance, right? And so, or when I'm feeling dissonant, right, does it have a purpose? And if not, how do I get resonant? And
Yep.
so, like, in my head, so if anybody likes music or whatever, like, that might help you think through it. But like, um, but what it reminds me also is I'm a necessary piece in the greater music and symphony of life, right? Because, like, without those trills and those grace notes and all those things that are little flourishes in the music, we don't we don't get the full body. We don't get the full piece. And you and I both share this deep, 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 deep love of music of all kinds, and dance, and like all this stuff. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
um for me, like, that feels like, when people ask me about that tattoo, I'm always like, it's my spiritual, like, perspective,
Hmm.
right? Like, on me in the world, like,
Yep.
in this whatever this design is, like, I am a necessary component. I Without my spice, this wouldn't taste right.
Yep.
And so, like, if we go back to all of you guys and all you kids, and like myself and all of the parents, like, each one of us was needed to create the next thing. And Dev, here or not, is still a necessary spice, right? As you were just saying.
Hmm.
However, I still, to this day, say, had he stayed, right, the lesson still could have been there. So I want to
Oh,
say that out loud. I want to say that out loud because I
that's
want to
so
be
true.
very clear
It's so true.
that if you're thinking of leaving, we love you,
Yeah. And you are
and
needed.
you are needed, and to please find people to talk to about where your feet need to be, and find that one little piece of ground to stand on. And if you choose to leave, we love you,
Yep.
right? Like, I think that it's not permission. I don't want anybody to hear that from me, because it's not permission.
No.
It's just an honoring of people's truths, including my own child's. Um, it's like if someone would have come to me as a teenager and just said to me, I see you and I honor what you're experiencing, and I love you,
Hmm.
and I'm going to sit next to you while you go through it. maybe that might have looked a little bit different, maybe not, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did want to say that out loud, like you, the spice that you bring, the grace note that you bring, if you're feeling that dissonance right now, like what do you need to get resonant?
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, and what's out there, because the world's full of opportunities for resonance. So maybe you just don't have your right people. Maybe you need some different tribe members. Maybe you need some chosen family instead of some toxic family members. I don't know, but I do know there's people out there that probably love you, you
Yes.
know, and would miss you as much as we miss our person. And that, you know, recovery and healing is a journey, and like it's up and down all the time, man. Like Friday I was in tears. By the time I got to work, I was all right, you know. But there were days where I had to turn around and go back home because I couldn't pull it together. So, you know, it's like
Yeah.
part of it. But this,
Yes.
that love is the cure.
Yes.
It's all about that.
And not just love of for other people or their love for you, but your love
Love
for
for
yourself.
me.
Yes. And that's not a selfish thing. And
Selfishness though. Do
yeah,
it for you so you can do it for others,
yeah,
right?
exactly that. Exactly that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, my love.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy we could have this conversation. There's a lot of other things that have come to mind, of course. So
Of course, we'll write them down. Maybe we'll do a part two.
I was gonna say, I'll have to write them down and we'll definitely have to do a part two. But thank you so much for being here and honoring us with your
Hmm.
story, with your wisdom, with your insight, with your humanness,
Hmm.
and just your ability to speak this language and to allow me to facilitate the space for the two of us in this way too.
And hey, love, thanks for staying.
Yeah. Thank you for staying. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for always acknowledging. Yeah.
Yeah.
Means
I got you.